The time for silence is over. From, it looks like IO figure, it may be low figure. Do you think it is impossible that there are at least a few people who went there to protest the removal of the statue, which was the initial gathering of the goal? Yes. Do I think any good people stayed? Again, I don't know anybody I would consider a very fine person who's standing next to neo-Nazis and people yelling out "gas the kikes," pardon the language, not mine, again, a direct quote, and advocating for Nazi policies that, you know, is marching by torchlight at night screaming blood and soil and Jews will not replace us. Again, as documented in the intro, I don't know anybody I would consider a very fine person that is staying with that crowd of people. I don't know anybody that I consider a very fine person that would go to the mall and take a picture of their child with Santa Claus with a group of neo-Nazis in the same location, all standing in line with them. You should apply the same standard. If you're going to ask what percentage of people in protests were peaceful and what percentage were looting and stuff, one should ask what percentage of the Charlottesville rally people were bigots and what percentage weren't bigots who simply didn't want the removal of a statue. Am I advocating arresting everybody at Charlottesville? Has that come out of my mouth? Or did I only advocate arresting those who incited violence and committed violence? Am I saying that Republicans and conservatives never get to hold a rally again around the country, even after Donald Trump encouraged his supporters to march down to the Capitol and loot the Capitol building? Or am I saying that those who committed violence and insurrection and those who incited it should be held to task for it? Again, Republicans can still hold rallies around the country, same as BLM. My standard here is the same. But those who committed violence and those who advocated violence absolutely should be held accountable for it. Michael Malice, I'm not familiar with Michael Malice, who is Jewish, not on the right, and was at Charlottesville researching far-right politics, wrote a book in which he attested that Nazis, KKK members, etc. were a minority at Charlottesville. I will have to look that one up for you. The sources I've seen have not stated that. Regardless, I again do not know anybody that I would consider a very fine person who is standing and protesting next to neo-Nazis for the same goal. I'll show up on a different day. Thank you. Do you disagree with that? Would you stand next to neo-Nazis and Klansmen? Do I have a source that the majority of protesters were a majority? I'm going to assume that you were asking that the majority of protesters were neo-Nazis and Klansmen. No, I do have a source that it was organized by Richard Spencer, who is the head of the neo-Nazi movement in the United States of America. That was in the intro trailer. It's the flyer for the Unite the Right rally. But I also haven't made the claim that the majority of them were Klansmen or neo-Nazis. I have stated over and over again that I don't know a single person I would consider a very fine person that would stand next to neo-Nazis and Klansmen and protest. So I answered your question. Can you answer mine? Would you stand next to neo-Nazis and Klansmen and protest? You wouldn't stand next to them and protest. So your own standards, your own personal standards, are higher than the people you're trying to excuse. I applaud you that your standards are higher. I don't know why you're excusing the people that stood next to the Klansmen and the neo-Nazis. That's what I don't understand. Obviously, there are people who went to BLM protests who might not know the organizers were. There, I would agree with you. But I don't know anybody at BLM protests that are chanting "Jews will not replace us." I hope we can recognize the difference here. You're not excusing anyone. Don't put words into your mouth. It seems like you're trying to say that the Charlottesville Unite the Right rally was perfectly okay. By your own admission, you wouldn't stand there next to him. If I'm misunderstanding you, feel free to clarify. Hell, you can call in if you want, brother. Bella wouldn't go to any protest. Bella, there might be a point where you would go to protest, but I can understand that sentiment. Protests can get crazy and wild. Okay, you didn't say that the Charlottesville rally was perfectly okay. You even said that Nazis and KKK members and whatever were bigots. Well, I didn't see that. I apologize. So can we agree that there were not very fine people on both sides of this thing? One side was protesting against the Klansmen and the neo-Nazis. The other side included Klansmen and neo-Nazis, and by your own admission, you wouldn't stay there with them. Regardless of the majority, even if it was one or Klansman standing next to you, would you leave? We're not dealing with one here, Mickey. We're dealing with a lot more than one. Again, we're talking torchlight rallies with hundreds, organized by neo-Nazis and white supremacists. And we're an entirely different standard than one. Generally, one guy doesn't show up with a hood to a protest for a Klan protest. Speaking from my experience in Louisiana where I saw this stuff, there's usually a few dozen to maybe 100. Neo-Nazis are a whole different ballgame. But if you go watch the Unite the Right trailer that we'll play at the exit of the video, we're not dealing with one or two here. From Bella, you were mad when you heard they were tearing down Catholic statues in San Francisco and it just got out of hand. I can understand that. Protests often do get out of hand. That's why it's important to look at what they're protesting for. And like I said, hold individual bad actors accountable. That doesn't mean you get to wipe the entire movement, right? But Black Lives Matter is advocating for less police brutality and equality before the law for black and white people. It's essentially Black Lives Matter also. Black Lives Matter too. It's not saying Black Lives Matter more than white lives. Are there going to be individual bad actors in any protest crowd? Oftentimes, yes. That doesn't that doesn't make the entire movement guilty. That's why I'm speaking to one rally here, as opposed to every Republican rally ever. The information you got from the non-right-wing author, Michael Malice, from Low Figure or IO Figure, said that there were people who went to the protest, the removal of the statue, and left when they saw the Nazis KKK, or were even attacked by the Nazis KKK. Okay, so can we agree at this point that the people left at the rally that Donald Trump was addressing specifically when referring to the Heather Heyer, who was murdered, were not very fine people? Again, I'm not talking about the issue of the Confederate statue at this point. By your own admission or by your own source now, they left. Anybody who stayed, your own personal standard is higher than that. You've already said you would have been one of the ones who left. What if Trump, who isn't the most accurate speaker, was referring to the non-bigoted people who were initially protesting the removal of the state and who, I'm assuming, removal of the statue, and who left when they saw the Nazis and KKK? Do you think that that would have been an important point for the President of the United States to clarify? A president who during a national televised debate years later was unable to come out and condemn white nationalists and white supremacists when directly asked, and a president who has retweeted a supporter screaming white power. This did not take place in a vacuum.
Next, damage control at the White House after President Trump retweeted a video showing a supporter making a racist statement. ABC's Rachel Scott is at the White House.
Tonight, the White House is trying to explain why the President of the United States used his enormous platform to amplify this racist message.
White power! White power!
Around 7:30 this morning, the president retweeting this video to his 82 million followers. A man shouting white power in a golf cart displaying Trump 2020 campaign signs. Trump supporters clashing with counter-demonstrators 2 weeks ago at a Florida retirement community called The Villages, according to its news site.
You'll still be crying on November 3rd. Oh, too bad! Too bad! You'll be crying on Nazi!
The president sharing a 2-minute expletive-filled excerpt of the site's video, adding, "Thank you to the great people of The Villages." Senator Tim Scott, the Senate's only black Republican, called on President Trump to delete the post.
I think it's indefensible. We should take it down.
More than 3 hours after posting, he did.
This is really not about the president taking it down. This is about the judgment of the president in putting it up.
In a statement, the White House says the president did not hear the one statement made on the video, adding, what he did see was tremendous enthusiasm from his many supporters. But the president has insisted he keeps a close eye on what he shares.
Did you notice that when you retweeted it?
Yeah, I noticed everything.
As outrage over racial inequality sweeps the nation, the Department of Homeland Security warns of an increase in white supremacist violence.
The president's tweet is potentially dangerous because it may be viewed by some white supremacists as a call to action or even a call for violence.
Tonight, his rival Joe Biden noting the president's message recalls this moment when a white nationalist rally turned deadly in Charlottesville.
You also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
Biden writing, today the president shared a video of people shouting white power and said they were great, adding the president has picked a side.
All right, Rachel Scott.
So again, by your own admission, all the people you would consider good people would have already left that rally. If I show up to a rally and I get my family out of the car and I see a bunch of Klansmen in hoods, I'm getting right back in the car. Just like if I walked into a mall and saw a bunch of neo-Nazis and skinheads, I'm turning around and I'm leaving. I'm not staying to protest. So the people who stayed to protest have lower standards than you personally do, or they were neo-Nazis, or they were Klansmen, or they were okay with being around those people. The news media is pitting people against each other. I blame the media big time. I disagree with you on that, Bella. When he tweets it, when he says it at a press conference, when I just report what the man is saying and doing, it's up to him to say and do better things. You can go through my tweet history. There's nothing in there about white power, I promise you, except maybe some, condemning it. But you said Trump should have made a clarification if he meant that the good people were not Nazis, KKK, who left when they saw the Nazis and KKK. Trump seemed to make that clarification in the same speech when he condemned them. Yeah, this goes back to what I was saying earlier about Trump being able to say one thing and say another thing, and they're in direct opposition to each other. So depending on what you want to believe or what you want to excuse, you can pick what you want. If I call your girlfriend a hoe and then say, but I'm sure she's a nice person, it doesn't excuse the first thing that I said. And again, let's not forget that Trump has a history of this stuff, of dealing with racial stuff.
President Barack Obama was born in the United States, period.
Are you a birther,
Well,
Donald?
Okay, let me just tell you, I was a really good student at the best school. I'm not like a smart guy, okay? They make these birthers into the worst idiots. Why doesn't he show his birth certificate?
3 weeks ago when I started, I thought he was probably born in this country. And now I really have a much bigger doubt than I did before. He doesn't have a birth certificate, or he hasn't shown it. He has what's called a certificate of live birth. A certificate of live birth is not even signed by anybody.
I still question that he was born in the United States, do you?
I have no idea.
You don't believe him?
I would. I'd love to believe him. You know what? I'll tell you what. I think he'd do a great service.
Even at this point?
Well, I don't know. Was it a birth certificate? You tell me.
A few years ago, you led the birther movement. You sent investigators out to Hawaii to find out whether or not Obama, which you said was not born here.
Well,
and it turned out to not be true.
Well,
so
I don't know. According to you, it's not true. I don't know.
He released his birth certificate.
You know, if you believe that, that's fine. I don't care. It's an old subject.
Is Donald Trump honest when he says that Barack Obama isn't a legitimate president?
So I knew you were going to ask that question.
Well, because
and
he's
you know what I'll say?
I
don't talk about that anymore.
So we will have a big statement, and I hope you're going to be watching.
I'm definitely going to be watching, but the bottom line is this. We know that Obama now, he was born in America, correct?
You watch my statement. We have to keep the suspense going, okay? President.
Am I saying that there were no non-bigoted people who went to the rally and who left when they saw the Nazis KKK? There were plenty of non-bigoted people at that rally. They were the counter-protesters who were protesting against the neo-Nazis and the KKK, and a former neo-Nazi drove their car into that crowd, murdered one woman, and injured 17 others. If you're okay, which you personally are not, but if you're okay with standing next to neo-Nazis and Klansmen at the same protest on the same side, it's not my fault that I can't tell the difference between you, the neo-Nazis, and the Klansmen. That's on you, buddy. Trump is just a rich prick. He's not a racist, though. I think he's probably a bigot, but I can't prove it. He has a history of being sued for racial discrimination. He has a history of the birtherism bit. I think he uses these people when it's convenient. Do I think Trump's a neo-Nazi or a Klansman himself? No. Do I think he knows that they vote for him and is content to send out things here and there that let them hear what they want to hear and believe that he believes in their cause? Yeah, absolutely. So you would disagree with the reports that the Nazis, KKK, were a minority of people protesting the removal of the statue. It depends on what you mean by a minority majority. Do I think they were all card-carrying Klansmen and neo-Nazi members? No. But again, by your own admission, you would not have stayed at that rally. And as I have said countless times, I do not know anybody, not a single one, that I would consider a very fine person who would stay in any location, whether it's a protest or it's the mall, with a group of neo-Nazis and KKK members. If a mob came to your church to tear down Jesus, you might get caught up in a protest. You would be a counter-protest against the Jesus removal, I would imagine. But I doubt you would be standing there with the KKK members and the neo-Nazis. Yeah, I agree. Low figure. I'm going to call you low figure because I can't tell whether it's an I or an L, so I apologize. But you have said you would have not stood with the Nazis and the KKK. I agree. I would not have either. I'm also saying I don't know a single person I would consider a good person who would have stood with them. You keep trying to make this position that there's all these good people who were non-bigoted that were there at the protest, when you yourself personally would not have stayed, as you have admitted. I don't know anyone I consider a good person that would stay with the neo-Nazis and the KKK. How do you know who was in a mob? I can look at who organized it, for starters. And then if you watch the video, I'll play the trailer again here in a minute. And I'll narrate all the parts that are from Charlottesville 2017. And you can tell. Where do I stand with Antifa? I don't find Antifa to be an organization. I'm going with the FBI on this one. If you show up to Charlottesville 2017 to protest against neo-Nazis, you are technically a member of Antifa. Do I think the individuals who resort to violence should be held accountable for resorting to violence? Absolutely. But do I think it's remotely equivalent to the Proud Boys, where you can move up in rank and where you have to commit violence to move up to the 4th rank as, in support of the cause, as advocated by the founder of the Proud Boys, Gavin McInnes? No, there's no structure like that I'm remotely aware of for Antifa. I think it's a boogeyman that conservative media is using to try to scare people. And again, this is the same old song and dance. We've heard this before. It was the same thing used against the civil rights movement, law and order, that Richard Nixon ran on, and that Dixiecrats, Democrats in the Deep South, before they moved over to the Republican Party, used to advocate for. These are not new things. These are old things. They're just being more blatantly advertised again. Well, if there is a particular ideology on the far right and it didn't have a leader, that wouldn't make it okay. Did I just say it was okay? I am opposed to fascism. I would assume you were opposed to fascism too, since you wouldn't protest with the neo-Nazis. Okay, cool. We are both now members of Antifa, except for the fact that we don't use violence. Did I not just say arrest those who commit violence? What am I missing here? The violent Antifa are the ones that scare you. I can understand that. Violent individuals could scare me too. That doesn't mean that it's a group. If I stood near someone who was Antifa and that Antifa person committed violence, would that reflect poorly on me? Okay. So Antifa is not an organization. We've already been through this once. If you have a disagreement with that, you need to take it up with the FBI, point out who the head of Antifa is, show me the organization that I can sign up with, and show me how I can move up in that organization. You have to provide a hierarchy. So the two things aren't equal right off the start. Okay. Second, if I stood next to an individual who committed violence in politics, I would either attempt to stop them or I would report them to the police to have them arrested, as I've already mentioned multiple times. Okay. Thirdly, show me the rally that Antifa organized. You just said before, because it doesn't have a leader doesn't make it okay. Did I say it was okay? I'm saying you're making an equivocation fallacy. You're comparing neo-Nazis and Klansmen to Antifa. One is a demonstrable organization. It has a hierarchy. It has a leader. It has founders. It creates rallies. The other one is not. I'm still opposed to violence in politics either way. One has an organization I can go after. One, I have to go after individuals who commit acts of violence. One is using violence to oppose fascism. One is using violence to advocate for white supremacy. These two things are not equal. That doesn't, just because one is less bad doesn't make it not bad. If I stub my toe and I have a heart attack, I'm going to address the heart attack first. If a far-right ideology turns leaderless and decentralized in the same way Antifa is, one can still make a connection between that ideology and the violence of the adherents. What is the ideology, or let me rephrase this, what do you believe the ideology of Antifa is? I know what the ideology of fascism and Nazis and Klansmen are. What exactly do you think that the ideology of Antifa is? Low figure, I asked you a question. Would you mind answering it, brother? What exactly do you think that the ideology of Antifa is? And while we give you a chance to write that up, we're going to watch a comparison between Nixon and Trump.
For decades in the U.S., politicians have used a law and order agenda layered with issues of race to try to win over voters. In the late 60s, Richard Nixon promised to restore order to American life, and President Donald Trump is running a law and order campaign in 2020. Though the phrase is the same, as Eric Sorensen explains, the context today is different.
The unhinged left-wing mob is trying to vandalize our history.
As U.S. President Donald Trump sounds off over cultural divisions in America, it is not something new in Republican politics.
The silent majority is stronger than ever before.
The great silent majority of my fellow Americans.
You can almost draw a straight line from Nixon to Trump. The silent majority, which was Nixon's way of sort of saying most Americans, at least most white Americans, quietly agree with my positions. They're both playing on sort of white working class racial grievances.
White grievances in modern America can be traced in part to this.
I'm about to sign into law the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
When Democratic President Lyndon Johnson sought to end segregation and discrimination, it was a landmark achievement for Black Americans, but also an opportunity for Republicans to realign American politics, especially in the South.
It is the voice of the great majority of Americans.
From Nixon on, a message that seized on the fears of white Americans.
They're not racist or sick.
Often emphasizing issues like law and order. Ronald Reagan addressed that head on before he was president.
They would inform you that law and order were code words that really meant a call for racial discrimination.
Bush and Dukakis on crime.
This ad helped George H.W. Bush, who was trailing, to beat Democrat Michael Dukakis for the presidency.
He allowed first-degree murderers to have weekend passes from prison. One was Willie Horton.
They're trying to appeal to the concerns of voters without directly and explicitly appealing to racism, because American voters also don't generally want to consider themselves racist.
Massive illegal immigration.
By 2016, following the first black president, Donald Trump revived the grievances of many white voters.
And we will take back this country for you, and we will make America great again.
And now, in 2020, the Black Lives Matter protests and the removal of Confederate statues represent a natural target for Trump.
These people are vandals, but they're agitators, but they're terrorists.
Only this year is different. Black Lives Matter was painted in front of the White House and later in front of Trump Tower. As protests defied the president, it's clear a much broader coalition is standing up for racial equality.
Our president today, he's not really helping with the cause. He's not really hearing about equal rights for all people.
They are aware of how the Republican Party is perceived.
This former GOP strategist says Trump is out of touch with the change happening in America.
What is his reelection message? It cannot be a grievance politics. That does not give a promise for tomorrow.
We are the party of law and order.
Those words have worked for Republicans for 50 years. But in 2020, many Americans are embracing a new message.
No justice! No peace!
Racial justice. Eric Sorensen, Global News.
So to go back to low figure, there are different kinds of Antifa. You can see the differences in their ideology from the representation of the flags. Okay, so we're back to it's not an organization, it's a whole bunch of individuals, and I've already condemned individuals which commit violence. Antifa is meant to represent anti-fascism. There we agree, and I am opposed to anti-fascism as well. Or I'm opposed to fascism as well, so I am anti-fascist by that definition. Thank God that Tangerine is no longer in office. Have I read the Antifa Handbook by Mark Bray? No, I have not. I'm not familiar with it. I agree, Lo, you didn't say it was an organization. I did. That's why I said we're back to it's not an organization. So comparing it to neo-Nazis and KKK and Proud Boys is an equivocation fallacy. They're not the same thing. And when I ask you for a definition or a definition of the ideology or the ideology that you were worried about, the answer you gave was that they're all different. That anti-fascists hold a lot of different ideologies. I agree, so I don't know which one in particular you're concerned with. I can't address your concerns if you can't even vocalize which ones it is that you're concerned with. If it's specifically violence in politics, I've already condemned that multiple times and said arrest the individuals responsible. I'm not sure where you want me to go from here. We're both against violence in politics. We agree. We both have said, you and I personally, that we would not attend a protest where neo-Nazis and Klansmen were there and around and vocal and chanting, gas the kikes, pardon the language, and Jews will not replace us and all this other crazy bullshit. Okay, you and I agree. Okay? The difference is I'm not trying to say that there were very fine people on both sides of this protest. I'm not trying to excuse a president or a former president who said that there were very fine people on both sides of this protest. You seem to be trying to excuse this. That's the difference. I've also went one step further than you when I said I don't know a single person that I would consider a good person that would attend a rally where there were neo-Nazis and Klansmen and that was organized by a neo-Nazi. You didn't express that you were worried about Antifa's ideology. You asked earlier about a decentralized right-wing ideology, and it seemed as if you were trying to make a comparison to Antifa. So I asked for clarification on what exactly you thought Antifa's ideology was. Good people on both sides, you remember that speech, absolutely ridiculous. I agree, it's a president of the United States committing an equivocation fallacy. I don't know a single good person that would show up where there was a group of neo-Nazis or a group of Klansmen that would stay. And if they stay and I can't tell the difference between the decent, quote unquote, person and the Klansman, that's not my fault. That's on the person who chose to stay. You wanted to know if I would apply the same standards to a decentralized ideology of any wing of politics. Then give me an example of a decentralized ideology that I would be opposed to. Again, I've already advocated against violence in politics. I'm not sure where you want me to go from here, brother. You're British, sadly, you still have your little Trump. Yes, y'all do, but at least your little Trump, after he got COVID and had to go to the ER, decided to start taking it somewhat seriously. Ours tried to play it off like it was no big deal. Yours also hasn't committed or advocated for the commission of an insurrection yet. And to my knowledge, Boris Johnson has not told his version of the Proud Boys, because I'm sure you've got one over there, to stand back and stand by in case the election doesn't go his way. So while yours is an idiot and definitely a right-wing populist, this one seems a little step further. You're not trying to back up Trump or anything like that. Well, I apologize for the misunderstanding. You have Proud Boys, you call them gammons. I'm unfamiliar with gammons, but I apologize and I am sorry. Nobody should have to deal with these idiots. Low figure, if you're fine with condemning people at a neo-Nazi protest and the people who stayed there with them, if you can admit with me that maybe those weren't very fine individuals, then hey, we're on the same side. So we don't have a disagreement anymore. You called them bigots several times, so you don't have to wonder where you are with them. Again, I don't think you're a bigot, but you have continuously, from what I can tell, and I will grant you that it is difficult sometimes to read through text, but you have said several times, or seem to attempt to provide several excuses for Trump's very fine people speech. And this is the only point I have continually made, that I don't know anyone that I would consider a very fine person that would stay at a protest on the same side as neo-Nazis and Klansmen. If you've always been in agreement with that, or if you are currently in agreement with that, then you and I have no disagreement. President Trump said a stupid thing and probably should have walked that back really, really fast. Probably shouldn't have said it in the first place. Certainly not retweeted white power a couple years later, and then been unable to condemn white supremacy directly when asked during a presidential debate. Gammons are just like Karens, but their husbands. That's a good one. I could see that. I hope I'm saying that right, by the way. Northern Ireland is remaining in the UK unless you're behind on the knowledge. I think what he's referring to, make the world better, is that without the open borders issue, you'll have the checkpoints again between Ireland and Northern Ireland. And they're afraid that's going to kick off the troubles from, what was it, the 90s again with the Irish Republican Army and everything else. So that was a big thing that they were trying to figure out how to do with Brexit, was how to basically keep that not a border, which it would turn into one if my understanding is correct. But I may be dated on that too. But yeah, he's basically asking if, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lo, but he's basically asking if you're concerned about that. Because again, that border with the checkpoints and everything that would have to go back into place if it actually, if you stepped out of the EU, they're worried that that would become a serious point of contention again. If it would spark any riots, then you would be deeply concerned or very concerned. Yeah, and that's the concern, is that it would spark off the terrorism bit again, because it would provide a very obvious focal point for the tensions and make it seem less like one country again. Lo, you did not provide excuses for Trump's speech. You were clarifying what I said. I said he didn't distinguish between the people protesting the removal of the statues and the Nazis KKK, and he did distinguish them. Then you accepted that and said essentially that it wasn't in good faith because of his prior statements. I don't think I accepted your statement the way you phrased it. As I recall, I've continuously said that I don't think anybody who was at that rally on the side standing with neo-Nazis and Klansmen was a very fine person. And therefore, calling everybody who would have been at that rally a very fine person, probably a shit idea. That's what I've said continuously over and over and over. You did accept that Trump made a distinction because he can say two contradictory things. Trump can say contradictory things. Yes, that I said. Let me put it this way. We have a Super Bowl. Majority of the people there are going to be Kansas City Chiefs fans and Tampa Bay Buccaneers fans, right? If I say everybody at the Super Bowl, very fine people on both sides of all the fans in the Super Bowl, but I'm not talking about the Kansas City Chiefs fans, and I'm not talking about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers fans. That statement doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless I am talking about those people. Now, whether they're registered as members of the Kansas City Chiefs sports team or the Tampa Bay Buccaneers sports team, they might not be registered directly with them. They may not be on the payroll. They may not be wearing a jersey. But they're certainly okay with being around all those people, and they certainly speak the same language and terminology and are comfortable hearing about football, aren't they? I'm saying the distinction Trump tried to draw doesn't exist. Because by your admission and mine, you aren't staying at that rally. I'm not staying at that rally. And I don't know a single good person who would, unless they're on the side of the counter protesters. That's what I'm saying. So everyone who wanted to protest the removal of the statue and left when the Nazis KKK members came are also Nazis KKK. Brother, I don't know how to draw this out for you any more clearly. They left. They were not part of the protest. I'm not sitting here calling you a bigot and a racist because you said you would leave. Quit trying to turn my position into something it's not. You can be against the removal of a statue and not be a member of neo-Nazis and KKK. And if you left, I've got more respect for you than I do for the people who stayed. But Trump's talking about the people that are in the crowds at the rally. Join me every Sunday afternoon for a new show where common citizens, you and I together, discuss with each other issues of today, where we demand proof and evidence is required, where we seek the truth and will not be silent. join me this coming Sunday afternoon and take part in America's oldest and most honored tradition.